Hello, Christ Church. Paul Fowler, our Lake Forest campus pastor. Been glad to share with you all this week on Psalm 89. We're in our last day this week, and I have a little bit more homework for you as well. I want you to read 2 Samuel chapter 13 through 19, which is the story of David and his son Absalom, who eventually takes over the kingdom, which is going to be an important part of our study today. Just a quick recap so far of where we've come. The psalmist here is Ethan, and he's talking about in verse 1 and 4 God's love and God's faithfulness. And he's going to look at the Davidic covenant as a way to demonstrate how God is loving and God is faithful. And he says that in the heavens, in the world that we can't see, God is awesome and he is amazing. And in the creation that we can see, God is awesome and amazing. And those of us that acknowledge that will be blessed when we understand who God is and what he's done for us. And then it talks about this Davidic covenant that specifically was spoken of in 2 Samuel chapter 7. And how God will establish his throne through the Davidic line. And that's Jesus Christ that we see. But as nice as it would have been to end then, that's not the whole story. Today we're going to see actually when David hits a pretty difficult spot, and Ethan is really crying out to God because of that. Let's start in verse 38. But you have rejected, you have spurned, you've been very angry with your anointed one, speaking of David. You've renounced the covenant with your servant. You've defiled his crown in the dust. You've broken through all his walls and reduced his strongholds to ruin. All who pass by have plundered him. He's become the scorn of his neighbors. You've exalted the right hand of his foes, and you've made all his enemies rejoice. Indeed, you have turned back the edge of his sword, have not supported him in battle. You have put an end to his splendor. You've cast his throne to the ground. You've cut the days of his youth short. You've covered him with a mantle of shame. Now, if you know the story of David, you might be asking, well, when was Jerusalem overthrown? How was David overtaken? There was no one else powerful at that time. God had surely established his throne. Well, this is the story of Absalom. As I mentioned earlier, you really should read 2 Samuel 13 through 19 to understand what's happening. Because what had happened is Absalom was the sister of Tamar and one of David's other sons. He had multiple wives. Had raped Tamar, one of his sons named Amnon. And so David didn't end up doing anything to Amnon, and so Absalom is upset, and so Absalom finds a way to kill Amnon. And again, David does nothing while his sons are fighting and killing each other. So there's a time when Absalom comes back, and Absalom starts to build this following of people till at one point they're able to claim, "Long live the king." And so as soon as David hears this, he starts walking out of Jerusalem in shame. And what happens is exactly what we see here. Ethan must have been on that walking journey out of Jerusalem, where people are throwing dust and they're throwing rocks at him. When it speaks about the enemies that were mocking him, that's exactly what happens when Shmi, who was the son of Saul, comes out and says, "Now you're getting what you deserve." And they're throwing rocks at him. His crown is in the dust, as it says here in verse 39. He's there barefoot, walking around. David had gone through a very difficult time. Why could Ethan say God is loving and God is faithful and then turn it into saying, you've rejected him? Let's read on, starting in verse 46. How long, Lord, will you hide yourself forever? How long will your wrath burn like fire? Remember how fleeting is my life, for what futility you have created all humanity. Who can live and not see death, or who can escape the power of the grave? Lord, where is your former great love, which is your faithfulness you swore to David? Remember, Lord, how your servant has been mocked, how I bear in my heart the taunts of all the nations, the taunts which your enemies, Lord, have mocked, which they have mocked every step of your anointed one. Ethan certainly was there seeing everything that David had to go through. And what's so helpful for those of us today in reading this, I love that question. How long, O Lord? Remember your faithfulness. Some of you have probably gone through many difficult times in your life, or maybe you're going through one right now. And a lot of times it's hard for us to talk about God's love and faithfulness. But I think it's even harder for us to have an honest conversation with God and say, what's going on? Why is this happening? This is why it's so helpful for us to read Psalms and to read poetry, is because now we're getting the emotion and the feeling behind the story, not just the details themselves. What God is showing us is that it's okay to ask God, how long? How long will this be? Why are you doing this? What is the purpose of these things? Because as much as we can worship God for his love and faithfulness, we can be honest and open and authentic to exactly how we are feeling. But that's not where Ethan ends his story. And in fact, we don't even see the redemption part of the story, which you'll see if you read 2 Samuel 13 through 19, of how God restores David. But Ethan here ends with this one line: "Praise be to the Lord forever. Amen and amen." I hope today that you can take some time to be honest about how you're feeling, your tough spot that you're going through, to be open and honest. Maybe you're someone that likes to journal. Maybe you need to audibly say these things. I don't know what the way is for you, but just know that you have a God that loves you so much that you can share exactly how you're feeling, and his love for you does not go away. And perhaps through that time of grieving, through that time of expressing that emotion and that anger and feeling, you might come to the same spot Ethan does, where he says, "Praise be to the Lord forever. Amen and amen," because there is a God who loves you, who's faithful to you, and wants to listen to exactly how you're feeling.